Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review we are looking at the S.H.Figuarts Thor from Age of Ultron, which a lot of people thought looked really good and a lot of people thought looked really bad, so now we're going to get to the bottom of it and see how it actually is. So first let's look at the packaging, because I know a lot of you guys care about that. You can see a little image of the figure on the front there with the nice window box. It says Thor, same picture on the side, some posing options which are all basically him just standing there. I mean, for the most part, they're not very dynamic poses, and we'll get to that as we go over the review. So there's the packaging. Let's look at the size of the figure first. He stands roughly, let's see if I can hold the ruler, about 16 centimeters tall, so he's got a little bit of size to him for an S.H.Figuarts figure, and that puts him at about 6 3/8 inches. So you're thinking probably that that's a decent size, but let me show you the Marvel Legends Thor that just came out of this exact same version of Thor. It makes it look completely tiny. Now this one's probably technically a little bit too big for the 6-inch scale. This one's definitely too small, and that's not a problem inherently because it's not supposed to be in a 6-inch scale. I just know a lot of you guys are interested about that. As far as comparing this to the Figma Thor, I'm going to do one big comparison with the S.H.Figuarts and the Figma Avengers, even though they're different versions of the characters. So we're not going to do that now. Plus, you're not going to buy one over the other because they're different versions anyway, so buy whichever version you want. Alright, so let's look at this guy's accessories first. The first one is technically the cape because it doesn't come on him in the package. It's the same type of cape as the Injustice Batman and the Injustice Superman. So it has that bad hinge system where you have those extra parts and it's that really cheap hard plastic, and it's the kind that sticks really far off the back with that one little peg. Now his doesn't fall off as easily, but you still get that weird combination of joints where the side pieces peg into the main piece and they have the hinges, and it's not necessarily bad. I mean, it can look okay. I don't know, there's something about it that I really don't like. Thor's is probably the best out of all of them, because it does hold up just fine like that. It doesn't look horrible like that, although this upper piece really does look bad. It's a completely different finish and the sculpt doesn't line up and it just sticks off and cut across flat. Just doesn't look good. But Thor's cape, you can fold it up like that and it actually looks pretty good folded up. So if you want it to just be narrow, like he's just standing there, that's good. And they did give it enough overlap to where if you bring it out to the side, not too far, because if you do that, obviously it looks stupid. But if you bring it out to the side, it actually doesn't look too bad. So if you want to put them up in the air or something, it'll work. It's not horrible. It's not my favorite design of cape at all, but his is acceptable, I guess, is a good way to put it. There's lots of shading and lots of sculpt work on there. Just also, this not having the same color red and a completely different finish, it's way kind of shiny or satiny, just doesn't look that good. Alright, but we're going to take the cape off for now so that we can look at the rest of the figure when we get to that point. And that's the hinge design right there, just that one single peg. And I don't know why they did this, but you can take these off. I guess if you want to just hang this down, but then it's not going to line up with that shoulder part. So I don't understand that. Maybe it's just for production purposes. Anyway, he's got a bunch of hands. So we have the two fist hands that are always on every figure we get. We have the two style pose hands, or the calling the hammer Mjolnir back to him hands, so that's nifty. We have some gripping hands, so that's pretty good. And then we have another gripping hand that comes connected to the handle of the hammer, so if you want to have him swinging it, he does of course come with the hammer. So this is just like a relaxed pose with that kind of loose or floaty. And then you can put this one on to where if you want him to swing it, like he's getting ready to take off, you can do that. If you want him throwing it forward, kind of, you can do that. Whatever you want to do, you have some options there. And the hammer is really nicely detailed. They nailed that. No pun intended. And then lastly, we have some alternate eyes, which have been the topic of some conversation on the internet because his eyes do look a little strange. They're a little buggish. He actually has, it's not a bad likeness. It's not too bad at all, especially compared to this one. That doesn't really look like Chris Hemsworth. From some angles it kind of does. This one, if you ignore the eyes and the not so great hair sculpt, it does in some angles look really good. In other angles it's acceptable. But here's the thing about the eyes. As far as location, they're okay, but they're a little big. He's got a lot of color to his eye right there. And if you look at these alternate ones, he has really large pupils, I guess irises, on that set of eyes. And then on that set of eyes, they are appropriately sized. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So let's take a look. That's the straightforward eyes. And what you have to do to swap them out is to separate the head, which I think if they're going to do that, the seam shouldn't be perfectly flat or perfectly straight. It doesn't look as good. It should have some jaggies in there so that it looks like the hair is overlapping. Anyway, we have to separate that, pull the faces apart, and then we have to pop this thing off of the joint, which looks really brittle, so be careful with that. It's not too hard though. I want to point out, these are a different size than the big ones, and those are already kind of big. These are closer in size to the small ones. They're almost the same. So let's use the small ones first and see how it looks. We'll just throw them on here. So the eyes to the right actually look pretty good, and I think that gives him the best likeness to Chris Hemsworth. I don't know why, but it looks pretty good. So I'm all right with that one. But let's put on those big ones and see how that looks. I've never met anybody with eyes with that much color, but he's got a lot of color in his eyes. It's like most of the eyeball. It looks like he's a cartoon with his eyes bulging out a little bit. Not so bad just because it goes off to the side a little bit and it's not as noticeable because of that, but he's got way too much color and it's just an odd thing. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of these interchangeable eyes in the first place. I don't think it's necessary really. It's cool that they're doing it, I guess, but you kind of have to do them right. And while his are better than Captain America, since half of his didn't even show up once you put them in because they were too high up, it's just not, I don't think so far they've proven that it's worth the expense of actually doing that. But it's not horrible, I guess. Alright, let's talk about the sculpt and paint, and then we'll get into the articulation. Sculpt work, there's lots of really nice sculpt work on this guy. Lots of angular bits, lots of curvy bits. Everything's really high detailed. Looks nice. They did the little checkerboard armor down there pretty nicely. Everything looks pretty good sculpt-wise, except for the hair and the arm. I don't know how many of you know much about anatomy, but that's not what the upper arm looks like. This is basically the backside of the tricep. I'm not going to use any fancy terminology. I'll just explain really quickly. This is the tricep here, and it comes all the way around to almost the front of the arm, and it shouldn't. This should stay all the way back here, like another quarter of the arm back, and then come down. Then we should have another muscle, and then the bicep there. And then the tricep is non-existent. There's no musculature back there other than this little bit of that tricep. So the upper arm, sculpt-wise, not good. The bicep is almost non-existent. It's really small, and the shoulder's okay, I guess. But that tricep line is way off for those of you that care about anatomy. It doesn't look right at all. And then the hair. I don't know why they did this, but the hair is sculpted really flat, and it doesn't fit the curvature of the cape. So if you go like that, it sticks out in the front. If you go like that, it sticks out in the back. What they should have done is made it a tighter curve, since it's a soft plastic, and then whichever way you lean it, it'll just flex and stay down. Whereas now it looks like he's got some kind of lion's mane or something. I don't know. And it's kind of soft sculpting. I don't know. It doesn't look that great to me. It's just something about this figure. It feels like they didn't put as much effort into it as they maybe could have. Because parts of it look really good, and then parts like the arms and shoulders not so much. Okay, let's talk about articulation. The head we already saw is on that double ball peg. The neck itself is on some kind of ball peg too. I haven't pulled it off to check, but it does move. So articulation wise, it works. It's just that darn hair that looks really bad once you do use the articulation. Cape is soft, so it won't get in the way of anything. For the shoulders, we have the actual butterfly joint in there, which is okay. It's effective, it works, and it doesn't look too bad. So I'm alright with that. It does give the arm better range of motion. If you want to bring it across the front, you can do that. Of course, it doesn't look good from the back, but that's the way butterfly joints work. Then we have our standard ball hinge in there, although it's really limited because this cap of the shoulder that hides the joint keeps it from going anywhere, which is a shame because the cap doesn't even look that good. It kind of hides the joint, but since it doesn't fit, like it's not flush with the joint itself, it just creates kind of a big gap, and it looks weird. It doesn't look very good. It's not very effective. And then it's supposed to have a bicep swivel, but the way they sculpted the cap, it doesn't really allow it to have much of a bicep swivel. So that's pretty disappointing. It doesn't work all that well. You can bring the arm up and down and about that far out to the side. So it's a little disappointing. And since the bicep swivel doesn't work up there, we don't get one because there isn't one lower. The elbow joint is a double hinge, and that works pretty well, so that's pretty good. The wrist hinge is basically a standard ball hinge, very small peg again. Be careful with that, don't break it. But you'll get a good range of motion out of that ball hinge because it'll swivel on both ends. For the torso, we have this strange design which looks okay from the front because we have this kind of continuous front piece of armor or outfit, and this has a hinge on it which allows him to use his ab crunch, but it sticks out really thickly, really far forward, and it throws off his look. And since his shoulders aren't really connected, he's got a very tubular look with arms just kind of connected to the top. It looks odd. Hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. Maybe it doesn't show on camera, but in person it does look a little bit weird. As far as the ab crunch goes, it's kind of strange the way this works, and I feel like this is going to end up breaking because it is hinged, but it's a brittle plastic and it doesn't have too much give to it as far as the joint itself. So you get to lean back all the way, which is fine, and that just kind of flops down. But when you lean forward, it doesn't really give you that much range. You can see he's still pretty much just standing straight up, and then this tucks in, but it's kind of binding the whole way through, so be careful with that. You can lean from side to side, so that's good, but then you get a giant gap in there. You can see the hinge for the ab crunch in there too. But you get a big gap from the side, and I don't know, it just, to me, a joint like this is way more effective than a joint like this. This is way too complex, and it's not even that effective, so I don't know. It's okay, it's just not particularly good. And then on top of that, or more accurately underneath that, we have this floating piece here, which it feels like they didn't really plan out too well, because it makes him look like he has a really big butt, and it doesn't sit in the right angle, or at least the way it's sculpted, it looks odd. Something about it's not quite right. You can swivel the torso around in there, but that doesn't have the best range. And then this, it doesn't look right. There's something off about it. I can't quite put my finger on it, no pun intended, but it doesn't look quite right. As far as the hips, we do have the hinged ball peg, so you can bring the leg down and then all the way forward, which is really good. You get good range of motion out of that, so if you want to put him in like a kneeling pose with the hammer, you can do that. So I'm not saying it's a bad figure, there's just a lot of weird stuff about it. So if you want to put him down like that, obviously I just threw it in a pose, so it's not great, but you can do that for the most part. You can bring the legs out pretty far to the side. One thing I noticed, his legs pop off without even trying. The first two times I was posing this guy, they just came right off in my hand. Obviously right now I just pulled them off to show you. They pop off really easily. I'm not sure. They're not super loose at the joint, so I don't know what happened in the design, but if you're posing him, you might end up with a leg in your hand. So just snap it back on and be careful. But I can show you, maybe if I haven't done this before, you can see the hinged ball peg right there, so that's how that works. Then we have the socket, which lets the leg move around, and the thigh swivel, which lets the thigh move around that socket. So his hip joints work pretty well when they're not falling apart. Double jointed knees, not the best range of motion, but they look okay. And then for the ankles, we have really good range of motion all the way forward, all the way back, and in classic, my favorite kind of ankle rocker. This particular one's kind of ugly, but it works really well, so I'll let it slide. And you saw we have the ankle swivel there as well, and a decent toe hinge. So the figure's not bad. It does a lot of things really well, and for the most part, it looks pretty good. There's just a lot of weird little things that might keep somebody from wanting to buy the figure, so that's why I point those all out. You guys are going to have to decide for yourself. It's not the kind of figure where I'm disappointed that I have it. It's just I'm kind of confused as to whether or not I like it or I don't like it, and it kind of changes as I pose it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You're going to have to decide for yourself. So there it is, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see my upcoming figure reviews, custom figures, and other fun stuff. And in the meantime, keep collecting.